Hi, this is Sebastien Braxton, and welcome back to Verse by Verse. This is episode number 14, and we're looking at Genesis chapter 1 in verse 27. Now, in this verse, the Bible tells us that so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. Now, this is a really interesting text that most people probably bypass, but it is the very first time in which gender difference is introduced in the Bible. Male and female is never mentioned before this. Now, there's this plurality inside of man, because you see, when God said, "Let us make man," the Hebrew word there for man was Adamah, which means of the earth. And until woman is created, we recognize that two Hebrew words are kind of separated in Genesis 2, where Adamah becomes a representation of humankind, of humanity, versus the word for male in Hebrew is ish, and the word for female or woman is isha. Now, in looking at this idea, God introduces these different genders. And what that tells us is that the author of Genesis believed that God wanted there to be gender differences, that God wanted there to be diversity, that the differences that women possess as opposed to men is something that was intended by God. There was never this sense of gender singularity or that God wanted everyone to be exactly the same. There was an understanding that in this diversity, there could be a representation of the immensity of the glory of God, that each individual is made in the image of God, that there is a unique glory that you or I actually reflect in God, just as the very features of a child reflects the mixture of features of his or her parents. You see, every child looks like their parents in a way, but not in another way, because it's just a different mixture of those very same features of which they come. It is no different when it comes to our relationship with God and our ability to bring glory to Him. But then there is a community element, because remember, God said, "Let us make men." That means that God exists in relationship, and the image of God could never fully be represented and reproduced unless we were also in relationship, unless we were also in community. You see, we live in a world in which discrimination is something that is pervasive. It is intrinsic to human nature to find groups in which there's an in-group and there's an out-group. There's an us and there's a them. This is human nature after the fall of man, because God did not mind the differences as long as there was unity. It was the unity in diversity in which God had created humanity for. But now that the world has fallen, now that there's been these groups and polarization and categorization by class, by race, by gender, by your age, the number one ways by which people are discriminated against, we can see now in our time how the message of Genesis 1:27 is more relevant than ever. You see, it was never God's plan that women would have less rights, because women were created for dominion just as the men would. It was never in God's plan that your age would ever separate you from the image of God or His purpose for your life. It was never in God's plan that the version of your skin tone or the nature of your hair would ever reflect a significant difference in terms of your value to the heavenly economy. And so how was God going to solve this in-grouping that was happening among humanity, these hidden biases and discriminations? God created the church, a place where people could come together of different cultures, different races, and despite their differences, they could find unity in the person of Jesus Christ. The church was supposed to be the one place where you could come and your race, your gender, and your age didn't matter, but that there was unity in Christ and in God, as this text reminds us that God is calling us to a radical unity, regardless of our differences.